My wife loves and sleeps with my boss. My name is John Miller. I'm 35 years old, married to Emma for the past 8 years, and until recently, I thought I had life figured out. I worked as a mid-level manager in a reputable marketing firm in New York, slowly climbing the corporate ladder, believing that with hard work and dedication, success and happiness would follow. Emma and I had built a life together, a modest home in the suburbs, weekend brunches, and late-night movie marathons. On the outside, everything looked perfect, but perfection is a fragile illusion. Emma was always the more outgoing one between us. With her radiant smile, sharp wit, and a magnetic charm, she had a way of lighting up every room she entered. People gravitated toward her naturally. When she wasn't working as a freelance designer, she'd be attending social events, networking, always expanding her circle. I admired that about her, or at least I used to. Enter Richard Coleman, my boss. Richard was the embodiment of corporate success. Early 40s, silver hair that somehow made him look more powerful, an expensive suit always tailored to perfection, and a presence that demanded attention. He was charismatic, calculated, and knew exactly how to get what he wanted. The kind of man you simultaneously admired and feared. I first introduced Emma to Richard at a company gala. Richard was polite, charming even, but the way his eyes lingered on Emma didn't sit well with me. Emma, on the other hand, was flattered by his attention. It started as harmless banter, light conversations during office parties. But slowly, things began to shift. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. But as weeks turned into months, the cracks in my perfect life began to show. Emma was dressing up more, even when we were just going out for groceries. Her phone was always buzzing with messages she refused to check in front of me. She started attending more office events, even those that didn't involve spouses. When I questioned her, she would brush it off, accusing me of being insecure. Friends started noticing too. "Dude, your wife is getting real close with your boss," my buddy Mark said during one of our Friday night drinks. I laughed it off, but deep down, I felt the sting of doubt. Was I losing her? One evening, Emma's phone buzzed incessantly as we watched TV. She smiled faintly at the screen, oblivious to my presence. Curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. When she stepped into the shower, I grabbed her phone. What I saw made my stomach twist into knots. "Had a great time last night. Can't wait to see you again. Richard." I scrolled through more messages. Flirty exchanges, subtle hints of intimacy, emojis that spoke louder than words. My hands trembled. I wanted to confront her immediately, demand an explanation, but I felt paralyzed. The next day, Emma mentioned she needed to go shopping in the city. Something didn't add up. I decided to follow her. She took an Uber downtown, and I stayed a safe distance behind in my car. My heart pounded as I watched her enter a cozy little Italian restaurant. Richard was already there, waiting for her. They greeted each other with a hug that lingered too long, their body language screaming a story I refused to accept. I sat in my car, watching them laugh, share a bottle of wine, her hand casually resting on his. It was surreal, like watching someone else's life implode. But this was my life, my wife, my boss. That night, when Emma returned home, I sat at the kitchen table, waiting. "How was shopping?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "It was fine. Got some stuff for the house," she replied, avoiding my gaze. "Did you get that from Richard?" I tossed her phone onto the table. Her face went pale. "I saw the messages, Emma. I followed you today." There was a long, suffocating silence. Then she sat down, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered. "Find out what, Emma? That you're having an affair with my boss. I didn't plan for this to happen, John. It just did. I didn't mean to fall in love with him." Her words were like daggers. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't even apologizing. "How long?" I asked. "A few months," she admitted. "And you slept with him?" Her silence was the only answer I needed. The days that followed were a blur of numbness and rage. I went to work, pretending everything was normal, while Richard carried on like nothing had happened. The audacity of it infuriated me. At meetings, he'd flash me that same charming smile, as if my personal life wasn't a casualty of his conquest. One afternoon, Richard called me into his office. "John, let's be professional about this," he began. "I value your work here. What happens outside these walls is personal." I wanted to punch him right there, but I didn't. I sat there, clenched fists hidden beneath the table, and listened to him talk about separating personal matters from business. Professionalism. That was his excuse for sleeping with his employee's wife. Emma and I barely spoke at home. She tried to explain, to justify her actions with talks of emotional disconnects and how she didn't feel seen. But it all sounded like noise. The betrayal was too deep. I was left with choices I never wanted to make. Should I fight for a marriage that was already dead? Should I expose Richard and risk my career? Or should I walk away from everything? I chose myself. Filing for divorce was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, but it was also the most liberating. Emma cried, begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Work became an emotional battlefield. Richard, perhaps sensing the growing tension, began sidelining me. But the universe has its own sense of justice. A few months later, a company restructuring placed me in a new division, reporting to a different director. Away from Richard, away from the constant reminder of betrayal. The process of healing was slow. Lonely nights, self-doubt, anger. It all came in waves. But eventually, I started focusing on myself. I hit the gym, took on challenging projects, and reconnected with old friends. I wasn't the same naive man who believed in perfect marriages and loyal bosses. I had scars now, visible and invisible, but they became part of my story. A year passed. I was promoted to senior manager, a position Richard had once implied I'd never reach without his endorsement. Ironically, it was Richard who faced demotion after an internal audit revealed mismanagement of funds. Karma doesn't forget. One evening, as I sat in my new corner office, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Emma. "I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment before turning off my phone. Some stories don't deserve a sequel. As I looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, I realized something profound. Pain changes you, betrayal scars you, but if you choose to rise, those very wounds can forge a version of you that's unbreakable. Emma and Richard taught me a painful lesson, but they also gave me the gift of clarity, and that, in its own twisted way, was the closure I needed. End of story.